In the name of Almighty Allah, the most beneficent and the most merciful. Assalamu alaikum everyone. It is the first lecture of the subject History of English Literature 1, Medieval to Romantics. And today our topic of discussion is Introduction to Literature and History, Anglo-Saxon period and Anglo-Norman period. Okay, let's start our lecture. First we have lecture outline. So the topics that we have to cover in this lecture are introduction to literature, introduction to history of English literature. In this introduction I'll tell you people why it is important to learn or understand the history of English literature before studying literature particularly. Then there are different literary periods. We will just have a look at that what different periods of literature are. Then we will discuss only two periods in this lecture, that are Anglo-Saxon period and Anglo-Norman period, and there is conclusion and references. Okay, starting with introduction to literature. Literature in its broadest sense is any written work. So any piece of writing is called as literature. For instance, if you talk about a written piece of text related to your science subject, related to your art subject, even mathematics, as long as it is written, so it is called literature. Okay, etymologically means a study of the history of words. The term derives from Latin word that is literatura or literatura. It means writing formed with letters. So the writing that is formed with the letters, what letters are they? They are the alphabets like A to Z. Any kind of alphabet, when you write them together, you write them in the form of the groups as words. They are called as literature, and there are frequent words on the page. See, you are looking at different words in this slide, so that is a piece of literature as well. Although some definitions include spoken or sung text, some definitions of the literature also include the spoken version or the sung version of any text. That is also called as literature. More restrictively, it is writing that possess literary merit. Writing that has some kind of literary merit means literary related to the literature, having like some kind of speech, some writing, having the characteristics in writing, in a sense that a piece of literature or the work is full of text that is full of literary figures of speech. There are some kind of similes, metaphors along with that. That is written for scholarly purpose, for writing and reading purpose. So that is what we call as literature. Literature is one of fine arts like music, dancing, painting, as it is meant to give aesthetic pleasure rather than serve any utilitarian purpose. So what is literature? It is any kind of fine arts. And what do we mean by fine art? Any art that gives us pleasure is called fine art. Okay, similarly music, when we listen to the music we feel pleased, our hair feel pleased. So similarly dancing and painting, these are the things which have some originality in them. So that is why the things which are original, we also like them, and they also give aesthetic pleasure. So literature also serves the aesthetic pleasure rather than give any utilitarian purpose. It means that utilitarian purpose means it does not include any kind of utility. It means it is not for some commercial purpose, rather it is just for the sake of pleasure. It consists of great books which are notable for literary form or expression. Okay, on the basis of the types of the literature, we have two distinctions between applied literature and pure literature. There are two types. We have applied literature and pure literature. Okay, what is applied literature? As the name shows, the literature that you apply. In this type of literature, the purpose of the writer is ignored in order to appreciate the literary value of piece of text. It means literary value. Literary value means written for some kind of benefit, for the sake of getting some benefit out of it, having some utilitarian purpose that will benefit the people. So that kind of literature is called as applied literature. For example, Darwin's The Origin of Species. So Charles Darwin's theory, that is origin of species, that has some literary value, that has some information for the people. So in that, the Darwin's own sense is ignored, his own purpose of his own ideas, his own point of views are ignored. Rather, what is focused is his theory. On the other hand, we have pure literature, the literature which gives no information as true or false, and no argument is made, rather it satisfies some expression. So the literature which does not give us that this is something true, this is something false, okay, you just follow this, you unfollow that. No, it gives you just a thing to taste, and when you taste, you feel pleased, you like it. All right, and there is no argument that whether something or some information is correct or incorrect. There is no such point in that. The pure literature, it is based on the poems, like Keats' poems, Ode on Aggression, and similarly dramas, novels. So that is what we call as pure literature, which just satisfies some kind of expression. It has nothing to do with true or false argument or not. All right. Okay, so introduction to history of English literature. First, I would like to tell you people that why it is important to understand the history of English literature. It is important because when you understand the history of anything, you can understand it way much better. For instance, you want to meet some person and you don't know his histories. First of all, you will say, okay, how you relate to that person, what is your name, how I am related to you. So you will definitely ask for some kind of history so that you can relate yourself with that person. Similarly, in introduction, in the history of English literature, we also just shake hand with the poets, novelists, and dramatists of different eras. We want to get familiar with different poets and dramatists, because later on we have to study their work. So it is important to understand them according to their biography, that which poet belongs to which era, he resided in which place, and what were his interests, and how he or she had impacted the later poets and novelists. All right. So the history of English literature extend over several centuries, starting from Anglo-Saxon period to postmodern or contemporary era. Okay, so its history extend over several centuries, like it's been like 15 to 16 centuries that history of English literature extends. And understanding the history of English literature is very important for understanding the contextual background of the periods in which literature was produced. What do we mean by contextual background? Okay, contextual background is the background of the social, political, and economic happenings of that time. What social settings or the social religious social customs that the people used to have, and what were the political system, whether it was kingship, whether it was democracy, and how it impacted the literature, what kind of thoughts that poets and novelists have related to the political system of that time. Similarly, if we talk about the dramas, so what type of dramas they were produced, what were their themes, were they wrote on political themes or economic themes, what were the main idea. All right, so that is all related to the contextual background, and that is why it is important to study the periods, because studying the period provides us the contextual background. Okay, so here we have literary periods: the Anglo-Saxon and Old English period, that extend from 670 to 1100 AD. So that is the first period in the history of English literature that extends from 670 to 1100. All right, next we have Middle English or Anglo-Norman period, 1100 to 1500. So 1100 to 1500 is a time period when there is okay, that is what we call as Middle English. Then we have Renaissance period. The Renaissance period is from 1500 to 1600 AD. Puritan age, it extends from 1600 to 1660. The Restoration period is from 1660 to 1700. And then there is Age of Pope, 1700 to 17 44. So what we have to cover today are these two periods, the Anglo-Saxon or the Old English period and Middle English or Anglo-Norman period. Okay, next we have the age of Johnson, 1744 to 1784. The Romantic age, 1798 to 1824. The Romantic age is from 1832 to 1900. Then next we have modern literature from 1900 to 1961, and postmodern literature is from 1962 onwards. All right, till now what is called postmodern literature. These are the ages of, or you can say the literary periods of English literature. Okay, so let's come to the topic, that is Anglo-Saxon period. We have to cover it. Okay, first we will try to understand the contextual background of this period, from which time to which time it extended, and yes, the important works, important genres in which literature was produced, and more the famous poet or whatever prose writers we have in the era. Anglo-Saxon period is also known as Old English period, that extended from 670 to 1100. This age started with Anglo-Saxon literature of the Angles and Saxon, the ancestor of English race. So this era actually started with these Angles and Saxon tribes. They were the ancestors of English race. The present day English race, they had ancestors who belong to Angles and Saxon tribes. They actually used to live by the west coast side of the Sweden and Denmark, and then they migrated from that to the England, where they settled permanently, and they started they settled permanently, and then they started became acquainted with the culture of that time, of that place. As a result, they got some few elements from that culture. They had some few elements their own culture. So when those elements of the both cultures, they got mixed, so they produced the literature which is called as Anglo-Saxon period, Anglo-Saxon literature. English was the common name and tongue of these tribes. So these tribes used to communicate in English language. That is why still they have English as a national language. Okay, before they occupied Britain, they lived along the coasts of Sweden and Denmark, and the land they occupied was named as England. That is why it is still called England today. Though much of the Anglo-Saxon poetry is lost, there are still some of the fragments left. Although much of this poetry is lost, but few fragments are still left, and we will look into what fragments they are. Fragments of poetry is found in this period. Which poetry? That the Flight at Finnesburg deals with the theme of battle against fearful odds. So that poetry existed, and it is found, the Flight at Finnesburg. So its theme were basically battle. What happened at that time, people used to wage wars, and they fought war. As a result, they got to deal with lot of things like fearful odds. They were fearful of so many things. So there's a theme of battle against fearful odds. Complaint of a doer describes the disappointment of a lover. The most important poem of this period is Beowulf. That you have to remember, Beowulf is the very first poem of this period. Important poets of this period are Caedmon and Cenewulf, and and they wrote about the fall of the angels. They had some religious theme related to the Christianity, the first fall of the man from the heaven. So they have actually talked about that. They talked about the religious themes. So themes of poetry are, okay, there are various themes, religious themes, as Anglo-Saxons embraced Christianity. Okay, so that is why they have talked about the religious theme. This period is also marked with the beginning of prose. There is the beginning of prose in this period, and the first prose writer who composed the prose was Alfred the Great. He was also King of England, who ruled till 1066. Alright, he was the king as well, and he was the prose writer. What he did, he composed the prose. And the question arises that what is prose then? Prose is totally opposite of poetry in its structure. Like poetry had rhythm and rhyme, while on the other hand prose is just a straightforward writing. Next we have Anglo-Norman period. As Anglo-Saxon period, that was based on the Angles and the Saxon tribes. Similarly, the Anglo-Norman period is also based on such tribes who were Angles and Normans. How? As I told you that Anglo-Saxon, the Anglo-Saxons and the Jutes, they were the three tribes who had been residing on the coast of Sweden and Denmark, and then they migrated to the England. All right. Anglo-Norman, Normans were basically French people, French tribe, the tribes those who used to live in the France. While on the other hand, Angles and Saxon tribes, they were Germanic tribes, all right, and they were French tribes, Normans. Okay. So what they used to do, Anglo-Norman period, it extends from 1100 to 1500. So what happened? There was a king, last king of Anglo-Saxon, that is Harold. He was defeated at the Battle of Hastings by William of France. So William of France is who? Who is William of France? He was actually the king of these Anglo-Normans, all right, and he was the basically king of France as well, and they were the tribes who actually then came to England and then settled there. So William of France defeated them, all right, at the Battle of Hastings and in 1066 AD. So Normans conquered England. As a result, the Frenchmen, they conquered England and started living there. So Latin was spoken in church at that time. So literature produced in Anglo-Norman period, it consists of three genres, that is romances, miracle and morality plays, and poets. So romances, if we talk about, this is not the romance of the romantic era, but it is these romances, they were the kind of plays in which there was shown some kind of adventure, all right. Miracle and morality plays, and then we have the poets. Okay, in romances there are stories of King Arthur, the War of Troy, mythical doings of Charlemagne and Alexander the Great. These are the names of romances, means these are the names of the plays written in the genre of romances, all right. Next we have miracle and morality plays. So miracle plays, this shows some kind of extraordinary things which we think that they are not possible. So such impossibilities were shown in these plays, and plays about creation of man, his fall and banishment from the Garden of Eden, they all come in the category of miracle plays, all right. Old Testament and life of Christ. Next we have mystery plays. In these plays, the uniform theme is the struggle between the powers of good and evil. The personages were abstract virtues or vices. So what used to happen? People who had virtues or vices, they wanted to represent them in the front of the public. So one of the persons used to become greed, other person was like a lust, and if they wanted to show virtues, so one person personify as truth. So these were the mystery plays in which there was some kind of mystery that it has to resolve, and the virtues and vices were personified. Okay, in poetry we have William Langland, and his work is A Vision of Piers the Plowman. He wrote this piece of poetry. Then we have John Gower. He wrote Confession Amantis. Then we have Geoffrey Chaucer at this period, and who is one of the famous poets of that time, and his prologue to the Canterbury Tales is also taught in universities, and it might have been in your syllabus as well, syllabus of poetry. So Geoffrey Chaucer wrote Remount of the Rose, Book of the Duchess, The Parliament of Fowls, Legend of Good Woman. Alright, so these were the poetry, mystery and morality plays, as well as romances of this period. Okay, I would like to conclude this lecture by saying that the history of English literature comprises of different literary periods, starting from Anglo-Saxon to postmodern era. We have already discussed such periods and their time periods as well, that from which time to which time they extended, and this history extends up till now. It means that the current era is it's called as postmodern era, and the history of English literature gives an idea of the socio-political background of the age, as well as the literary genres in which the literature was produced. So we have also looked into the background of Anglo-Norman and Anglo-Saxon period, that from where did the Anglo-Saxons and Anglo-Normans came, and what happened, who were the kings, they fought the wars. Later on, we also discussed the literary genres, like in Anglo-Saxon period there were poetry and prose, which the literature was produced. Later on in Norman periods, in Anglo-Norman period, there was the romances, mystery and morality plays, as well as poetry. These were the genres in which literature was produced. All right, that's all for today.